Good evening, night shifters. This is third shift HFY. Settle in and let tonight's stars tell their story.
I was paid to write about division, about war, scandal, corruption. But what I saw, what I lived through, was the moment we chose to fight for each other instead. I was embedded in the press pool during what they called the final summit. Nations gathering one last time, not to cooperate, but to argue over dwindling resources. Droughts, border conflicts, digital blackouts that turned cities into panicked zoos. Everyone brought their blame and their bravado. You could taste the tension in the recycled air. China accused the West. The West pointed at tech conglomerates. The conglomerates shrugged and looked toward the stars, already planning their off-world hideaways. I had my headline pre-written. One planet, 50 flags, no future. But then something strange happened. Not in the summit, not with the leaders. It started with people, ordinary people. First in Nepal, then Uganda, then New York, Tokyo, Reykjavik. They stopped speaking, not protesting, not resisting, just stopped. Doctors called it catatonia, a neurological freeze. Some said it was a new neurovirus. Others said a digital contagion, some kind of algorithmic cascade that collapsed the mind. They sat where they were, at desks, in cars, in parks, completely alert but no longer there. No memory, no resistance, no emotion, just empty. We called it the silence. Within a week, there were 800,000 cases. By the second week, 12 million. And not one single case followed a political line. No borders, no race, no language preference, no ideology. It spread like it didn't care who you were, because it didn't. And here's the worst part. Those who tried to suppress it, who tried to contain the afflicted with military force, triggered something even darker. The silent began to respond. Subtly, almost imperceptibly, but real. Entire convoys vanished in fog. Cities blacked out for hours. One South American bunker was found filled with water. No rain, just water. That was the moment governments stopped lying to their people, because they didn't have anything left to say. We always thought the end would come with a bang, but it crept in like sleep, soft, strange, and irresistible. I remember the third week because the planes stopped flying. Not because they couldn't. There were still pilots, still fuel, still orders. But every pilot who sat in the cockpit froze. Hands on controls, eyes open, silent. Commercials, military craft, supply drones, all grounded. And with them, the illusion of distance, isolation, that thin belief that one place could be safe while another suffered. Gone. Hospitals were full of breathing statues. Streets echoed with the sound of nothing. Entire skyscrapers stood like tombs, full of employees still at their desks. Not dead, not dreaming, just gone. And yet, nothing seemed aggressive. No blood, no battles, no broadcasts from the thing responsible. Just more and more people falling into it. That's when the fear changed. Governments began to shut down their borders, but by then, it was meaningless. There were no borders. There were only patterns. The silent were forming them. Cities where the afflicted drifted, unconsciously, into perfect spirals. Lines, grids, diagrams only visible from the sky. My editor called me from a rooftop in Istanbul. "You need to see this," he whispered. "They're drawing something." "What?" I asked. "I don't know," he said, "but it's beautiful, and I think it's for someone else." That's when I stopped being a journalist. That's when I became a witness. I packed my bag, grabbed my mic, and boarded a bus with a driver who hadn't slept in days, heading toward one of the places the silent had gathered. He kept whispering the same thing, over and over. They're listening. That's why they don't talk. They're listening for the answer. We used to think consciousness was the peak of evolution with weapons, but I watched something older, quieter, take control. The place was called Kilmar Ridge, just a forgotten mountain range out in British Columbia. Not even the locals remembered why it had a name. No signal, no roads, no power, but that's where they were gathering now. The silent, dozens at first, then hundreds, moving with no plan, no leader, no force, just drawn. I got there on foot. alongside a caravan of the unbroken. Scientists, poets, soldiers, mothers, no one in charge, just people who needed to see. Just people who refused to run. They moved in silence too, not afflicted, just humbled. We camped near the summit, and at night, under the aurora, we watched them. The silent weren't moving anymore. They had formed a massive circle, perfect, human bodies in meditation, eyes open, arms resting gently on knees. Some were from Seoul, some from Nairobi. One man had a Boston Red Sox hat. Another wore a sari stitched with starlight blue.
They didn't blink, they didn't breathe. And then, the noise came. Not from the sky, not from their mouths, not from any speaker. It came through the ground. A hum. Subterranean, not seismic, not machine. And when we pulled out our recorders, our sensors, our microphones, they didn't pick up anything. The sound wasn't for us. It was in us, like a memory that had always been there. Like a lullaby our species forgot how to sing, like something was trying to teach us how to listen again. That was the first night I cried. Not from fear, from knowing. Knowing we weren't the top of the chain. Knowing that something was waiting for us to grow up.
They didn't teach us language. They taught us silence. And in silence, we found each other.
The circle grew. Thousands now. The silent sitting, kneeling, some even standing, but unmoving. We'd begun to notice small details, perfect distances between them, fingers curled at the exact same angle, pupils dilated identically, regardless of light. Biologists started crying. Mathematicians started sketching spirals. Philosophers stopped asking questions. All of us, broken in different ways, started to feel something, whole. And then it happened, not to the silent, to us. A ripple, from the earth, from the sky, from the bones. You couldn't hear it, you couldn't measure it, but everyone felt it, even the skeptics, especially them. I turned and saw a young girl beside me, maybe 6 years old, dirt-smudged cheeks, wearing a coat 2 sizes too big, no family, no one claiming her. She was staring straight into the middle of the circle, and humming. A strange, simple tune, the kind of tune that feels like it's always existed. Others picked it up. A man with a prosthetic arm, a soldier, an old woman holding a candle. No lyrics, no rhythm, just that same fragile, perfect hum. It was the answer, not to a question, but to a call. Whatever this force was, alien, spiritual, buried within the quantum code of reality itself, it hadn't taken us. It had waited for us to remember it. And in the silence, we found the one thing louder than war, louder than fear, louder than death. We found each other, not just as nations, or races, or beliefs, as a species. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't defeat. It was understanding that we'd been playing the wrong game. The president of the North American Alliance was the first to speak. She didn't hold a press conference. She broadcast her speech over an open global channel. Every language, every screen. We do not control this. We never did. But we were given a chance, a thread, and together we must pull it. Within hours, every major power stood down. Aircraft carriers were recalled. Military satellites shut off their targeting protocols. Spy networks went dark. Nuclear arsenals were powered down, some dismantled entirely. Why? Because the silent were showing us a map, a pattern, a blueprint of something better. It wasn't in words, it was in position, rhythm, vibration. Quantum engineers from Japan worked alongside South African mystics. Arctic tribes shared firelit chants with Amazonian physicists. Children translated dreams into numbers. It didn't make sense. It shouldn't have worked. But it did. We found ourselves building something, not with hammers, not with code, with will, with trust. In the place where we'd once drawn borders, we began to draw symbols. In fields once torn by tanks, we planted mirrors. In cities that once competed for skyscrapers, we shared open sky. We didn't become perfect, but for one shining moment, we became one. And every silent soul standing motionless in the heart of every city smiled at the same time.
They spoke, at last, not to command, not to explain, but to answer a question we didn't know we'd asked. It happened in the rain. Not a storm, not a deluge. Just a soft, soaking hush across the world, as if the sky itself wanted to listen. In every place they stood, the silent moved. Some opened their eyes, others lifted their arms. All of them smiled. Not the way we do, not with muscle or teeth, but with light. From their skin, their eyes, their breath, they pulsed, a glow that resonated with the rhythm of that ancient hum.
Then, as one, they spoke. You have remembered. 3 words, heard in every language, at once. Not translated, not spoken aloud, known. People collapsed to their knees. Others wept. One scientist screamed with joy and ran headlong into the ocean.
Because in those 3 words, we heard everything. The cosmos had been watching, waiting, hoping, not for domination, not for worship, but for a partner. We weren't being tested. We weren't being punished. We were being given the chance to prove that intelligence means nothing without compassion. And the moment we chose each other over power, the moment we heard the hum, we passed.
We answered. The silent began to walk, not into ships, not into cities, into the stars. And some of us were invited.
This is my last report, not because I'm out of words, but because words no longer feel like enough. They offered me a place, not because I earned it, but because I saw. And that was enough. I declined. Because someone had to stay. Someone had to remember.
The world isn't perfect. It never was. Some still hoard, some still hate. But now, most of us know something we never did before, that we're not alone. And that being human doesn't mean being the strongest, or the smartest, or the fastest. It means choosing love in spite of fear, choosing peace in spite of anger, choosing each other again and again when everything in the dark tells us not to. They said we'd never survive our own nature. They said we were too violent, too selfish, too divided. But they didn't understand the one thing we've always had. We fight for each other, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. The silent gave us a gift, but it wasn't light, it wasn't power, it was perspective. That every scream, every war, every heartbreak was part of the climb, and we made it, together. So, if you're hearing this decades from now, maybe you're in orbit, or on Mars, or somewhere I'll never see, just know, the day we stopped shouting, the day we finally listened, was the day we became human in the eyes of the stars. And if that's not worth remembering, then maybe nothing ever was. End transmission.